everybody. This is your friend and brother, Derrick Day. And boy, oh boy, do I have some things on my mind today. Today, another unarmed citizen in Minneapolis was murdered by ICE agents. His name is Alex Preety. Alex Preety is a nurse. He was a legitimate protester. He was filming ICE, which is totally legal to do. And when one of the ICE agents assaulted a woman by pushing her to the ground, Alex Preety responded not by attacking the ICE agent, but by going to render aid. And then he was pepper sprayed. And after that, he was jumped, as we would say in the hood. He was jumped by 6 ICE officers, one of which happened to find a gun in his holster. Second Amendment proponents, insert your take here. And one of the ICE agents, when he saw that weapon, he took it out of the holster, and another ICE agent proceeded to unload like 6 rounds into the man. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what your spiritual proclivities are. That was fucking murder. No matter how you slice, dice, or julienne that, as Ron Popeil would say, it was murder. Flat out. And let me say something about this, because the whole thing about murder in this context is that it's first of all, is state sanctioned. State sanctioned murder. In case you guys don't know, this is how Nazi Germany got its power. It was state sanctioned homicide. It was the murder of political opponents. This is how they operated. And while some of you will say, well, President Obama, he was considered the deporter in chief. Yeah. And you know something, the numbers actually bear it out that Obama deported more people than Trump has. However, because I'm like Sir Mix-a-Lot, I like big butts and I cannot lie. And this is a big butt. But Obama didn't use the methods that Trump is using. He didn't use terror. He didn't use force and Gestapo tactics, thug tactics. He didn't do that. Everything that Obama did, and to a lesser degree Biden, was done with due process. Now, that being said, I've got some issues. I've got some real issues with this, because there are whole swathes of people that just kind of let this go, and they say, well, this is cool, this is okay. You know, it's like these people are watching and they're saying, good, that's what needs to happen. And the sad part is that a lot of these people identify as Christian. Never mind that your Bible says to look after the stranger who's within your borders. Never mind that your Bible tells you to look after the poor and the downtrodden, the disenfranchised. Never mind all of that. It's basically, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say this again, that most of you Christians who call yourself Christians, you're really not Christian at all. You're Paulians. You're Paulians. You think that what Paul said trumps what Jesus said, and it doesn't. Because if you're going to be a Christian, then that means you are a little Christ, not a little Paul. But I digress. That's a subject for another time. But the whole thing is that the whole philosophy behind Christianity is totally anathema to what you're seeing happen on the streets of Minneapolis and in other cities right now. So this isn't just an immigration discussion. This is a moral discussion. This is a moral discussion. And let me stop here. Let me put my finger in this spot for just a second, because everything legal is not moral, because slavery was legal, but you can never make a moral case for it. Slavery was immoral. And just like now with these cases in Minneapolis, these big roundups of immigrants, they're trying to rid the country. And let's be very clear about this, that the whole purpose of this is to rid the country of brown and black people, people that don't look like them. You know who them is. Because listen, there are wide segments of Eastern European immigrants that are in this country illegally, but they're not going rounding up them. They're picking on specific places where they know that they can rely on the low-hanging fruit of visible minority populations, and that's what they're doing. So let's just say this: that these widespread roundups, they might be legal. I'll give you that. Maybe they are legal, and that's questionable, but they may be legal, but they are hardly moral. And I defy you to make the case for morality for that. And watch this. When what's happening is that we're normalizing cruelty against the other. This otherism is a cancer that is plaguing this country, this otherism, identifying the other who is not like us. And we have to get rid of them that are not like us. And while I'm here, I want to say this about that too, because you guys who are, rah, 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 yeah, Trump, yeah, go, MAGA, yeah, we're making America great again. All of you people that are saying this, right? You'll say out of one side of your mouth, they're taking all of our jobs. And then you say out of the other side of your mouth, you're taking benefits. And there is well-documented information that says that illegal immigrants are not receiving benefits. Let's start with that. Illegal immigrants are not receiving widespread cash payments or other incentives. And even if they work, it's like what you have to choose. Which is it that you're picking on? Is it the fact that they're taking your jobs, or the fact that they're taking your benefits? And they're not taking your jobs, because the jobs that illegal immigrants are typically doing are jobs that regular Americans no longer see themselves doing. They're not what you would call aspirational, and they're certainly not what you would call life supporting. So there's that. And so watch this. When you start normalizing this kind of cruelty toward others, you're building the foundation that eventually swallows you, because what can be done to others today can be done to you tomorrow. What's to stop you from being the other? This is for you, Black conservative. Because you think that somehow you align yourself with this whole MAGA movement, that somehow all of this hatred and vitriol is somehow going to pass you by. I got news for you. In a best case scenario, you'll be like Steven from Django. Best case scenario. Best case scenario. But let me just keep going here, because what I want to talk about is like this is a whole greasing the skids kind of thing. These things don't happen overnight. It's not a mega change. It's not something that's just outright and outward. This is subtle. This is very nuanced. This is a change that happens slowly over time. And watch this. This greasing of the skids is the normalization of state power, racialized suspicion, and detain now and verify later kind of thinking. That kind of enforcement. And you got to catch this. I mean, because listen, I'm just a voice in the wilderness crying out. I'm nobody. But there are two things that I do have. Is one is that I have a voice. I have a very articulate, I have a very pointed voice. And two, I have a platform. And so I am going to relentlessly, unabashedly use my platform to help the poor, the disenfranchised, and the oppressed. I'm going to do that. And if you don't like it, you can turn me off. I don't care. But I'm going to say what I got to say. So watch this. This whole immigration agenda is racial bias wearing a suit and tie. This is not this is not anything that's making the country great again. In fact, what makes America great is its diversity. I don't care what Stephen Miller and other fuckers like him say. The diversity of America is what makes it great. It's the diversity of America that won 2 world wars. It is the diversity of America that created the world's greatest economic engine. It is the diversity of America that created these things, not because great white men were sitting at the helm. That's not it. It was diversity. But watch this. Racism and policy never shows up with a bullhorn. It doesn't even show up with a microphone. It shows up in whispers. It shows up in selective enforcement. It shows up in targeted restrictions. It shows up in broad assumptions about danger. It shows up in systems designed to punish the right kind of people. And it shows up in plausible deniability wrapped up in legal language. This is where racism and policy rears its ugly head. And you got to pay attention, because if you don't pay attention, I'm serious, if you're not watching what's happening, sooner or later, this will be on your doorstep. And watch this whole thing with Renee Good and Alex Pretty. I said way back in the day when people like Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and others, Philando Castile and Mike Brown and others, when they were being mercilessly killed by police, and I was speaking out against this, and I used to say to white Americans, especially white Christians, because I was a Christian minister at the time, and I would say that if you spoke up about this, you could cause this to come to an end like in a week. If American Christians simply spoke up about the decimation of Black lives at the hands of police, you would have ended this shit in a week. In a week, it would have stopped, because then the country realizes that its meaty middle is opposed to what's going on. But because you didn't speak up, now these are white people, mainstream white people, that are being murdered. They're being shut down. They're being accosted. It isn't Black people now, because let me tell you something, and watch this. When white people start getting murdered like this, the frog is completely boiled. Yeah, I hope y'all know what I mean. That if you want to cook a frog, if you want to cook a live frog, you don't just throw him in the skillet because he'll jump out. But if you put them in the water and gradually turn up the temperature, gradually turn it up until eventually it's at a roaring boil, at that point, the frog is cooked. And that's where we are now. We're at the frog being cooked. Now, one of the things that I want to call out here is the Black church leadership. Because the folks that are supporting this whole MAGA thing, this whole Trump thing, these are people that call themselves Christian. And they say that this is a Christian thing to do. Now, the Black church has historically been a stalwart, a bulwark of resistance, speaking truth to power. And now we don't have that. It's like these MAGA folks, they're doing whatever they want, saying whatever they want, and they say it from the standpoint of, this is in their mind, what would Jesus do? And you have all of these organizations, the Church of God in Christ, the National Baptist Convention, the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World, all of these organizations, they don't say anything. Now, don't get me wrong. there are pockets of people that actually speak out. There are two that come to mind right away. One is Bishop Talbert Swan, and the other is Dr. Bernice King, who is the daughter of the late great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I know they speak out. And Bishop Barber, I can't remember Bishop Barber's first name, but he's another one. These are three people that are speaking truth to power. They're not giving hall passes for this nonsense. They're speaking out against it. But the rest of y'all, what are you doing? This is a golden opportunity for you to show up and show out and to put some of this nonsense in its place. This is a good time for you to speak out and speak to white Christians like Dr. King did in his letter from a Birmingham jail and call them out for their indifference. Let's say that, their indifference. But let's say this, systems trained on outsiders rarely end up with outsiders. Sooner or later, you're getting to everybody. It's like when Hitler was in power and he had the SS, the SA, the Gestapo, and all of these organizations. Yeah, they were rounding up Jews. They were rounding up gays. They were rounding up blacks. They were rounding up the Roma people. But at the end, they wouldn't stop there. Then they would start rounding up people that were against the government. You see, this otherism never stops with just the other, because eventually another other has to be put in place. And that's why this isn't just a Latino issue. It's not an immigrant issue. This is a civil rights issue. And this is an issue regarding Christianity. And I'm pointing the finger at Christianity because that is the predominant religious persuasion in this country. And it is a black church issue. Now, let's start with the travel bans. Travel bans under national security, they target non-white countries. They target Somalia, they target Nigeria, they target Senegal, they target Pakistan, they target anything that's non-white. You don't see travel bans for Slovenia or Hungary. You don't see that. But here we are. You don't see travel bans for Georgia or Ukraine. You don't see that. And watch this. Jesus, your Jesus never said that that anybody's region was bad. In fact, one of the well-known stories in the Bible is the story of the woman at the well, where Jesus is talking to a Samaritan woman, which the Samaritans were considered to be the dregs of the earth to the Jews of that day. But he's having a conversation with her. Why? Because he's making a point, and that was also reiterated in the story of the Good Samaritan, that the others are not always bad. So, this whole thing about blanket suspicion because of somebody's color, because of somebody's language, because of somebody's region, because of somebody's culture, that is anti-Christ. Anti-Christ. And you want to know where your quote unquote devil is coming from? Look in the mirror. That's where your devil is coming from. Another thing, this whole thing, family separation dressed up as discipline. This whole thing with the little boy Liam, who was taken away from his father and used as bait to try to bait somebody into surrendering. And watch this. There are a bunch of conservative outlets and pundits that are saying, no, that's not what happened. The father ran away. No, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. And if you believe the narrative of this government, of this administration, man, I got some swampland to sell you. I got a bridge to sell you in Utah. I mean, listen, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And you have to understand that, like, that all of this isn't a glitch. This isn't an accident. This is a feature of this administration, and it's a feature of the United States. Otherism is a big thing because this nation is built on boogeyman. It is built. The Native American was a boogeyman. The black people that have been enslaved, have been brought here and enslaved, they were boogeyman. Women were boogeyman. Socialists, communists were boogeyman. Asian Americans were boogeyman. It's like this country has to manufacture enemies. Because if we're the shining city sitting on a hill, we should have no enemies. We should be the country that everybody looks to when they want to do better and be better. But this is the thing, like, the same people who cry out pro-life, save the children, protect the unborn. They won't do that for migrant kids, for brown kids, for black kids, for refugee kids, for Spanish-speaking kids. If it's not our kids, we got nothing to say. We got nothing to say. And suddenly compassion turns into a technicality. I'm telling you, this is like, this is not faith, y'all. This is tribalism with Bible verses. And you're standing out by your hypocrisy. Your hypocrisy makes you stand out because you're wrong. You're dead wrong. And the black church has an opportunity to call the white church on the carpet on this, to call white Christians on the carpet on this and say, hey, guys, listen, this is not how it works. This is not how the Jesus thing works at all. We have to change. We have to do better. If we're going to make the life in Christ look meaningful or attractive to anyone, we have to do better. But I digress. And so now you got fear is policy and poverty is punishment. Fear is policy and poverty is punishment. There is research that finds that 1 in 7 immigrant families reported avoiding non-cash benefits out of fear of immigration concerns, despite many being eligible. They could get it, but see, this is one of these things that throws your whole narrative about, immigrant families are just here to get benefits. A lot of them avoid it, even though they could get it, even though they are eligible, because of immigration concerns. And I'm talking about legal immigrants. I'm not talking about illegals. I'm talking about legal immigrants who could be entitled to benefits that don't get them because they don't want to be otherized. Because if they get otherized, they'll get round up like other folks, and ICE does their thing. Watch this. It's like people who need help avoid help because the government weaponizes anxiety. And Christians defend this like it's holy. But the Jesus story is not punish the poor. It's feed the hungry people. It's care for sick people. It's to protect the vulnerable, the disenfranchised, the oppressed, the other. And you have this force multiplier policing. And I want to stop here for a second because, first of all, let me set the record straight for everybody that's listening. ICE is not law enforcement. ICE is not law enforcement. ICE is essentially slave patrol. They're out here trying to round up the others. And they're operating from a modification in the old adage about kill them all, let God sort them out. They're like, round them all up and let God sort them out. That's not the way we should be doing this. We are a nation of laws, and laws have due process. And whether you're here legally or illegally, you should have the benefit of due process because that's our nation. That is our way, or it's supposed to be, but it's not. It's not. And due process is going out the way. And you need to understand this, because if you get used to the fact that due process goes away for the others, soon due process will go away for you. And then what? At that point, it's too late. When due process is gone for you, it's too late. And this whole thing about having these big roundups, that if this were a matter of taxation, they wouldn't be going into businesses raiding people, because these people are in business, they're paying taxes, right? And it's not an issue out of trying to get people who may be getting benefits, because they're going and rounding up people at work, and it's not that they're trying to just make sure that everybody has a good way of life, because they're going in and they're taking kids. And the Christians support this because it sounds orderly, but orderly is not moral. Again, legality is not morality. And sometimes order is just suppression with better branding. Man, y'all got to wake up. And I'm going to tell you, the Black church leaders, they should recognize this instantly, because we Black people have lived through this. We've lived through this oppression. We've lived through the disenfranchisement. We've lived through we've lived through all of this. And now we see this happening to people who are coming to this country. They're looking for a better life. And let me just say this too, because they'll say, oh, well, like everybody in America, they came here legally. No, they didn't. Ellis Island was a fairly new thing. This is something that Ellis Island came up like in the 1800s, a real immigration policy. And even when the immigration policy was in place, there were people back in the day, they had issues. White Americans had issues with Italians and Eastern Europeans coming to this country. So they had others then. And once these people came in and got assimilated and everything, then basically they took on the way of their master and started chanting the same thing, keeping the same kind of people out that their people descended from. So when ICE is a machine that doesn't care who it crushes. It doesn't care. And the machine doesn't stop at immigrants. Again, it's like, what happens when all the immigrants are rounded up and they're all put out of the country? What happens? Do you guys all stand up and cheer? Yay, all the brown people are gone. All the Black people are gone. Yay. What do you do then? You start coming after Black citizens? Do you start coming after Indian citizens? Chinese citizens? I mean, the people who are American citizens, but they are of other descent. And we've seen ICE even accost Native Americans. That is absolutely rich, guys. That's absolutely rich. That is absolutely insane. And when you normalize this kind of aggressive enforcement, you don't get safety. You get a government that learns that it can operate with fewer consequences. Please hear me. And that's how you grease the skids for citizens being rounded up as well. And the evidence here is not abstract. Reporting has documented that aggressive tactics lead to administrative warrant approaches. And this should sound the alarm for constitutional protections. Man, I could go on and on. And one thing I need to talk about too is like U.S. citizens that are unfairly or wrongfully detained. There was this one picture of this grandfather being led out of his home in his underwear. And this guy turned out to be a U.S. citizen. But because he was of Hispanic descent, he turned out to be a target. Somebody had said, well, we got a Mexican that lives over here. And then they go and round him up and take him out of his house. And more to the point is that we have already seen in cases where they have these deportation stations like in El Salvador, and now they want to put them up in Venezuela, where U.S. citizens are being sent away. Do y'all think that's okay? And I know you're probably saying, well, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. But listen, you when you're breaking eggs to make an omelet, you're breaking them the right way, because if you break them the wrong way, what you do is you get an omelet that's full of shells, which is not very pleasing to eat. You know, when you start treating foreigners as suspicious, what happens when you have citizens who look like foreigners, who speak like foreigners? Do you round them up and cast them out? You know, this other thing too about American citizens, or not even American citizens, but people here who are here legally. There was a case of a father and a toddler that they were deported in spite of a judge's order. The judge said that they had the right to be here, and ICE rounded them up and deported them anyway. And let me tell you something: if your Christianity sees a toddler in a detention machine, and your response is, well, technically, you've been discipled by power, not compassion. And you're far from what Jesus taught. And, the black denominations, they could actually speak up and say, they could draw a line in the sand. And this will be a moral line that says that children should not be made tools of deterrence. And again, I talked about U.S. citizens. ProPublica magazine reported more than 170 cases of American citizens, of U.S. citizens that were detained by immigration agents, some of them who were actually deported. I mean, this is a flashing red light, a flashing red signal, not a mistake. At some point, somebody needs to speak up. Listen, I could go on and on, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, because I don't want to sit up here and talk all night. But it's this: if any of this is okay with you, you lack basic compassion. And I know that some of you Christians are saying that empathy is toxic now, that we shouldn't have empathy. I would say go back and look at the story of your purported savior. Because if you somehow align any of this with the teachings of Jesus, you are hopelessly and irrevocably mistaken. I say irrevocably because I think that, like there's a saying in the Bible about being given over to a reprobate mind. And I think that when you start conflating what ICE does, what Trump says, with Christianity in any way, shape, form, or fashion, your ass is reprobate. You have completely fell off the script. And I honestly, I'm going to tell you something. I'm an optimist. And my wife tells me that I'm too much of an optimist sometimes, but I'm an optimist. And I often say, people can change, people can redeem themselves. But something, I honestly believe that when you're caught up in this and you seek to do harm to others under the auspices of somehow being Christ-like, I believe you have a reprobate mind, that you are beyond changing. You're beyond hope. That's what I'd say. Somebody here said named John Smith on YouTube. He said, "It's all okay with me. I voted for this." Hey, John Smith, you're fucked up, buddy. You're a complete and total fuck up. And I hope that you experience the level of emotional content that is bestowed on the rest of humanity by ICE. I hope that you experience, I hope that you get the full ICE experience. That's what I hope. That's what I hope. And again, when you look at the videos of Renee Good's murder and Alex Preeti's murder, you see people that have acted without basic compassion. I can't wait to hear the hot mic for Alex Preeti's murderer. But we know that the agent who killed Renee Good said fucking bitch after he shot her and calmly holstered his weapon and walked away. You know what? I'm not giving any hall passes. If you're, listen, this is what I'll say to you. If you are a Christian, if you call yourself a Christian, that means that you're modeling yourself after Christ. Then that means you need to look at all of this and say, you know, this is really fucked up. Yeah. No, John Smith, your mom does. But anyway, either you stop calling yourself a Christian and supporting this, or if you support it, just simply denounce your Christianity, reject your Savior, and be who you are. Be the shitty human being that you are, because that's what you are. If you support this in any way, shape, form, or fashion, you are a really despicable human being, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You know what? I'm not going to respond in kind. This idiot is chatting on YouTube, and some people you can't give him any oxygen. So I'm not going to give him any more oxygen. But you know, I'm really, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you have to say in the comments, because if you're a Christian, you can't support this. This is anathema to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And if you support this, then renounce your Christianity. Check that button at the door. Just be the shitty human being that you are. And the other thing too is this whole there's both sides narrative. I get so tired of that. There aren't both sides. You know, I'm not saying that the left is all good, and I'm not saying the Democrat Party is all good. But what I will say is that the Republican Party right now are being led by the nose by evil people, and they're doing evil things. And you can't look at this with critical thinking, with a rational mind, and not come to that conclusion. But y'all, I had to speak up and say something, and I want to say to Alex Preety, rest in power, dude. Thank you for doing the right thing. To the and to his family, that you may somehow find some comfort. To Renee Good's family, rest in power, sister. And I hope that you find your family finds the peace. I just, y'all, this is absolutely grieving. It is absolutely grieving. But that's what it is. That's what it is. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to put the link out here. I'm going to copy the link and I'm going to put it in the chat. If in case you want to join. You feel free to join in. But understand this, there are two things. One is that if you don't have a logical, rational argument, we're going to shut that shit down. If you're appealing to emotion or trying to appeal to authority, we're going to shut that down. We're not going to do ad hominems, because if you think that you have to insult me to make your point, we're not doing that. But feel free to join in. I'm going to hang this out here for just a minute. and see if anybody wants to join in. Somebody said, I'm a potty mouth. Man, if only you knew. I cuss you up one side of the flagpole and down the other, and my IQ is still 140. Yep. So I'm putting the link out here. You feel free to join. But I think personally that that most of you Trump humpers, you don't have the balls to join in. You don't want people to see your face. You don't want people to see your name. Oh, and that's the other thing too. If you chime in and I can't see your face, you don't get in. I'm gonna hang this out here for a couple of minutes. That's right. Oneida Gilbert said some of the churches did more talking about the dress than all of this. And I'm an optimist as well. I keep hoping and praying, putting it in the atmosphere if you like. Yeah. Put that out there. And you can feel free to click the link. Here's the link in case you missed it. You can join in. Think you can put me in my place? Shoot your best shot. Another person said, and I don't know if you're saying this about me or about MAGA, tomato. When you regurgitate known lies, then nobody can trust a word or thought you speak, and that's exactly right. Because Vice President J.D. Vance actually said that the narrative was wrong. That what was being said about Renee Good was a lie, and that and then that's the other thing. People will come out and they chime in and they'll call a narrative that they see fake without providing corroborating evidence to support why they think it's fake. It just doesn't suit your narrative. I don't mind if you come with facts, but another thing too is that if all you can do is regurgitate the talking points of the right from OAN or from Fox News or whatever, I'm gonna shut that down because that clearly you have basically abdicated your thinking to someone else, and I don't fuck with people who don't think. Thinking is important to me, and if you're thinking, if you got your thinker on, we can talk. If I see that you're not a thinker, if I see that you're a clone or a bot, or just someone who regurgitates talking points, I'm gonna shut you down. So anyway, I put this up here for a minute. Nobody's joined in because the maggots have no balls. And there you have it. I expect to see some of them in the comments because they don't have any balls. They don't have the balls to face me or talk to me directly. So instead, they'll hide behind their comments because that's the kind of keyboard warriors that they are. So until the next time, and I'm sorry I wasn't talking about Kaizen, I wasn't talking about self-improvement, and y'all don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted. I'm not lowering my vibration by talking about this because you have not only the right, but the responsibility to call out what's negative in order to preserve your peace. And that's what I'm doing here. And I thank you all for giving me what about 45 minutes of your time. And I will be back next week with more Kaizen moments and the Kaizen Way podcast, and also growing in real time with myself and Aaron Tomlinson. And we have some other projects coming down the pike. I'm excited. But until the next time,